Welcome to this afternoon's Wheelhouse Talk with Grand Rapids City Commissioner Joe Jones. The Hauenstein Center's Cook Leadership Academy is excited to bring this talk to campus. My name is Jay Levi Alford, and I am a second-year Cook Leadership Academy Fellow and a biomedical science major here at Grand Valley. As you might already know, the Hauenstein Center's Wheelhouse Talks highlight the philosophies and experiences of leaders from a variety of disciplines, communities, and cultures. These individuals take center stage to share their experiences and perspectives with us. Their lessons help us to chart our own paths forward and provide a blueprint towards reaching our goals. The Wheelhouse Talks are a space for reflection and innovative learning. They are a call to arms for anyone seeking to create and foster positive change and a celebration of human endeavors and the potential within us all. Now to introduce our speaker. Growing up as the youngest of 9 children on the east side of Detroit, Commissioner Jones's parents instilled in him the critical importance of service and knowing thyself. He was also taught life lessons that have shaped him into the person he is today. Significant among them, that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their origins. Commissioner Jones took these life lessons with him to Oakland University, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree in communications arts. It was at Oakland that he met Jessie, his wife of 20 years. Joe and Jessie share 4 children and 5 grandchildren. Reverend Jones was also conferred a master's degree in ministry leadership from Cornerstone University and has served as an ordained minister for more than 10 years. While growing up in Detroit, Commissioner Jones took a special interest in serving the grassroots community. His first community organizing experience came by way of Detroit Summer, a multiracial, intergenerational collective in Detroit that works to transform communities through youth leadership, creativity, and collective action. This experience led Joe to take his first positions out of college at 2 Detroit community-based organizations, Youth Snap Back and the Warren Connor Coalition as business organizer and lead organizer, respectively. Commissioner Jones moved to Grand Rapids in 1996 and began work in sales and marketing, while also diving into service on various boards and committees. In 2000, Joe started his own business, EE Milestone and Associates Incorporated, a purpose-driven consultancy whose mission is to add value and wisdom to organizations in the area of communications, inclusion and diversity, and cultural competence. He led Milestone for over 14 years and served as a partner with the Strategic Communications Group, a public relations marketing firm. Since 2011, Commissioner Jones has served as president and CEO of the Grand Rapids Urban League, a 74-year-old civil rights organization whose mission is to provide the means to empower African Americans and other minorities to achieve economic self-reliance, parity, and civil rights. Joe leads the development and implementation of an agenda that promotes economic empowerment as a means of elevating the standard of living in the underserved urban communities of Grand Rapids. On February 23, 2016, the Grand Rapids City Commission unanimously appointed Jones to serve out the term of now Mayor Rosalind Bliss as the 2nd Ward City Commissioner. Then, in August 2017 primary, he was successful in his bid to hold the 2nd Ward City Commission seat, garnering more than 50% of the vote. Since his time on the Grand Rapids City Commission, Commissioner Jones has been an important figure in many of the priorities vital to the Commission's work, including addressing economic disparities in Grand Rapids, working to improve police and community relations, and building strategies to confront the city's affordable housing crisis. In addition, he has been a part of selecting Grand Rapids' new city manager and a host of other concerns relevant to voters in Grand Rapids' 2nd Ward. Ultimately, Commissioner Jones sees his multifaceted work as a way to make Grand Rapids a place that provides opportunity for all people. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Joe Jones to the stage.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Jay, and thank you to the Hauenstein Center for the opportunity, the invitation to be with you on this afternoon. I consider this both an honor and a privilege, and let me make it known early that this happens to be actually a holiday for me. Anyone who knows me knows that every Friday is a national holiday in my book. It's a day that I look forward to every single week. I could have a day full of meetings, it doesn't matter, because it's Friday, which means it's the beginning of the weekend. So it's good to close out the day with you on today, and especially good to be able to come and talk with you about our beloved city, Grand Rapids. As Jay had mentioned, I've been serving in the capacity as a city commissioner now since 2016. And I think it's fair to say that we are rolling along. Quite often, I'm sure you have people in your life who will ask you that pretty basic question, how are you doing? And usually my response is, I'm doing well, and with regards to life, I have very few dull moments because what's happening right now in our city and the growth that we're experiencing is something that not many people have ever experienced. And so in some aspects of what we do at City Hall, I'll give you a little inside baseball, to some extent, we're kind of learning as we go, right? Because if you haven't had experiences or lived experiences, it's kind of hard to predict what's going to happen. So we spend a lot of time obviously studying and depending on those who have experienced growth in cities. But I will tell you, it's both exciting, it's exhilarating, and it's also very difficult. I say that because there's something to be said about the power of wisdom. And these are the times in which I really do wish that we had more folks in our city, in our community, who have wisdom that they would be willing to make available to us in terms of what it means to be part of a city that's growing in the direction in which we're growing. And so I often say that when it comes to a growing city, there's no doubt that although it's hard, although we have challenges, I like this much better than being a city that's not growing. And yet we have these issues that are not unique to Grand Rapids. As you know, we're the second largest city in the state, behind Detroit, and it's fair to say that we have probably the hottest economy in the state of Michigan, and you have more and more people who want to live within the confines of the city. And because of that, we have increased tension. Because those who really need to live in the city, because in the city is where the amenities are, in the city is where perhaps their appointments are and family, those are those who have been historically marginalized in our community. They are in many ways being forced to leave the city because of the inability to afford to live in Grand Rapids. I've talked to enough folks in my life who grew up here who are constantly shaking their heads, expressing surprise that actually Grand Rapids is growing at the pace in which it's growing, and they said they could never ever imagine a city in which folks could not afford to live within the confines of the city. And so it really does speak to just how quickly change can occur, and the importance of really looking at the work that we do through a very strategic lens and trying to find some solutions to some very, very complex problems. And so again, I mentioned the affordable housing crunch, which is real. It is as real as it gets, and I will tell you, my colleagues and I who sit on the commission, if one of us had one day, if we had the idea or the solution to that problem, we probably wouldn't be commissioner for too long, because we would probably travel the country and visit every other urban center and probably get paid lots of money to bring that solution, because it's happening everywhere. But I want to suggest that it obviously hurts the most because it's here. It's in our own backyard. And so, when you take an issue like that and perhaps you look at it through a lens of leadership, it is not difficult to just kind of set it in the hands of perhaps city staff, or set it in the hands of those who who went to school for years and years to understand the trends around housing. But I like to think that when it comes to leadership and it comes to very complex issues, I like to say that I don't necessarily run to problems, but I don't run from problems. And I think when you give thought to engage or growing into becoming an effective leader, that's one attribute that I would suggest you give some thought to. We know perhaps you have folks in your life who, is there anybody here who knows anyone who loves drama? Right? Those are usually the folks that when it comes to some serious issues, when it comes to anything, they're running to it because they just want to be a part of it. They want to see how it unfolds, right? Kind of like when I was younger, my dad used to, the number one rule was if you see a fight taking place and a crowd is gathering, don't go over to where the crowd is, right? This idea of kind of staying away from where the trouble is. However, as mentioned, if that issue is right in front of you, it's something that quite often you shouldn't run from. And I like to believe that a lot of the issues that we're dealing with in our community, whether it be affordable housing, whether it be police and community relations, whether it be economic disparities, whether it be health disparities, now is not the time to just kind of sit on the sidelines and watch it. You literally, I'm not saying that one should run to it, but I do think it's critically important that you begin to, if you haven't already, that you commit yourself to begin to engage. And I like to call that process, that's a process in which, for some of us, that's very uncomfortable. And I like to say that a lot of what I do is in the uncomfortable. I don't know about you, but I don't wake up in the morning looking for things to run to. I don't get up in the morning and think to myself or ask my wife, okay, baby, where can I find drama? Let me get there first thing this morning, right? But we are at such a critical time right now that requires, in my opinion, a rebirth or a recommitment to civil discourse, right? For some, that's not cool. It doesn't work. This idea of actually having dialogue and trying to come to a better understanding because you've made the commitment to sit amongst one another. And I'm a firm believer in the power of civil discourse, and I'm also a firm believer in this idea of disagreeing without being disagreeable. There are often times when people ask me, why did you go into politics? And I tell them all the time, yes, it's thankless quite often, but I love it. I love being part of something that ultimately could have an impact on how our community grows, how it forms, how it evolves in the future. And so I have a front row seat, which quite often is kind of puts you out there and makes you a target. But at the end of the day, I'd like to be right there and a part of it instead of perhaps sitting back, watching, and wondering. And so here we are in Grand Rapids. Here we are in a city that I believe is a legitimate medium-sized city. One of the things that I often share with my colleagues, in fact, they mock me on the commission, is Grand Rapids is a legitimate medium-sized city with big city problems. And, for those of you who perhaps grew up here and you've just known it as this place that's kind of grown little by little and you see it, evolving and maturing, we got some big city problems in the city, and it requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. It literally requires more than just having, again, decisions being made by those who have been elected as well as city staff and other experts. It really does require this idea of community, engaging in a space, and really availing yourself to, perhaps coming up with some responses and some answers and some solutions to some very complex issues. I will tell you that between the work of City Commission coupled with the work of the Urban League, which by the way is very much, for me, a place of great passion. The Urban League is, for those of you who don't know, it's a historic civil rights organization that has been around for nearly 110 years nationally. It was established in the North, in New York, at the end of slavery, and really the beginning of the Great Migration, and where you had a number of freed slaves who were migrating north, and they were seeking opportunity. And so they were seeking housing and education, they were seeking health services, they were seeking economic opportunities as well. And when you know it, that 110 years later, that is essentially what we do. Those are the four pillars in which we operate from as an Urban League affiliate. And on this year, we turned 75 years old. And We are one of 3 in the state of Michigan. There's Southwest Michigan / Battle Creek, there's Southeastern Michigan / Detroit, and then there's us, the Urban League of West Michigan. And we are, again, one of 80 throughout the country. And I often explain to folks who are considering coming to work and be part of the Urban League family, really there's just one of the prerequisites that in many ways that's non-negotiable is if you can't commit in understanding that this work is personal, then this probably is not the place for you to work. Because I can tell you, my brothers and my sisters, that when it comes to engaging in community and really working diligently to try to find solutions and opportunities for those who've been historically marginalized, that work is personal. Because we have the opportunity to get into the lives of individuals, and it gets really, really uncomfortable, it gets very heavy. I will tell you that for those of you who are in the nonprofit space, perhaps you would agree, and for those of you who are considering jumping into the nonprofit space, when it comes to direct service, it's real easy to just go into a funk. Because what happens is you begin to get to know your client guest, and all of a sudden becomes very, very personal. And you take it as a challenge that you feel obligated to do whatever you have to do to help that individual or those individuals. It's personal. And so we've instituted within our affiliate here in Grand Rapids this idea of self-care. Because, if the requirement that I'm putting out there is that this work has to be personal, well, for anybody who's here who comes from a big family, family is complex. And a lot of perhaps what you're dealing with in family are very personal issues. And so it takes on this new meaning when it comes to the work of the Urban League, and it's something that I'm very, very, very proud of because we have developed ourselves into being an organization that people trust. And so when you think of the urban core, when you think of an area, again, that has been devastated all throughout the country, and it's occupied primarily by folks who have been historically marginalized, who have come up against broken systems that have been in place for centuries. Not decades, centuries. And I will tell you one of the most popular questions that I get, I can guarantee you that at least 3 people a week will ask me this question, and that is, well, Joe, how do we fix it? Right? How do we fix, the disparity that exists with regards to the academic outcomes of students of color in the urban core compared to their white counterparts in the suburbs? How do we fix the issue of the economic disparity? How do we fix the issue of the incarceration rates, right? When it comes to African Americans being incarcerated in significant larger numbers compared to their white counterparts. How do we fix that, right? And my response is always the same, which is before we can have conversations about how to fix it, we first have to understand how we got here. And so that requires a commitment to history, understanding and becoming a student of history. I am working diligently, hopefully before I leave this earth, there will be in one sentence my name and the word historian. I'm working really, really hard because history, although it is something that is very heavy and can be rather depressing, it also is something that gives me hope. And it gives me really a sense of understanding, and it will give you a sense of understanding because what it does is it provides what we all need when it comes to looking at complexity, which is it gives you context. And we have to understand that when it comes to history and really delving into history, it means that you have to go to other sources. And that requires that, again, there's a diligence there. That means that you have to go and seek the opportunities to really get more than 1 or 2 narratives. Because I think it's fair to say that there's been the story that's been told is rather misleading. I bet if I went around this room, and I wouldn't require you to say it out loud, but if I asked you to kind of write down how do you think we got here? How do you think, why do you think the educational outcomes are so abysmal for students of color? Or why do you think the economic plight is so great for African Americans? Perhaps you would have, again, theories based on what you learned in high school, college, grad school, whatever the case may be. What I would like to do is to challenge you is to go deeper and tap into some of those authors perhaps who you've never heard of, but individuals who their entire lives have been committed to really telling another narrative. Because when I say that it gives me peace, I have peace because although I don't have the answer to every problem that the urban community is dealing with, I have peace in knowing and understanding how we got here. And there's something to be said about that, man, I'll tell you, because if not, you will rack your brain, you will perhaps throw your hands up in utter despair and say, I'm done, because it's just too much. Most folks who decide to take the plunge and really look to engage and lean in on issues, you know, after a while, there's the questioning of oneself. Like, why am I doing this again? Because I want to suggest it's real easy to kind of sit back. It's real easy to kind of watch it from the sidelines. You know, I stand here before you as someone, I operate with privilege. I know I do. I'm a middle income earner. I've got a wife who has gainful employment. We've got a savings account, we got a checking account, we got a retirement. I'm privileged. And so I actually have the choice. If I chose to, I could say, you know what? I'm going to leave that to everybody else. But there's something to be said about trying to be part of creating a city, a community, in which more and more people can prosper. And that's, I tell you what, if it's one thing that gets me up in the morning, it's like, okay, how can I be a part of trying to make Grand Rapids a city that is a model in equity? And the reality is I know we have some in our community who, when they hear equity, when they hear about making Grand Rapids more inclusive, there's a little tension or nervousness that sets in. Because perhaps the thought is, well, that means it's going to adversely affect me. But I got news for you. If it's one thing I've been there for 22 years in Grand Rapids. If there's one thing I know about Grand Rapids, we operate with plenty. Right? I moved here in 1996, and I was just amazed at what I had stepped into. Because coming from Detroit, you know, how many of you know this is not Detroit? Amen? This is not Detroit. And it was not Detroit back in 1996. But what I saw before me was significant opportunity. Significant opportunity. And I would tell you that I'm being very, very, very transparent here. I was puzzled because I looked around and it seemed as if, in particular, communities of color, folks who look like me, didn't seem to be engaged, didn't seem to really be taking advantage of the opportunities that were being made available here. And I was critical of that. I didn't understand it. But I knew it had to be something else because it didn't make any sense. Because, I mean, as many of you know, there's always been opportunity in Grand Rapids. But the question quickly became, why aren't more people of color taking advantage of the opportunity? And I want to suggest that my theory, after a couple of years here in Grand Rapids, was that we lived in a city that in many ways was, as Dickens said, it was a tale of two cities. It was two different cities, two different ladders to opportunity. And I want to suggest that we had an African American community that in many ways was operating from a place of oppression. And what I saw was the manifestation of that. Now, the reason it was somewhat foreign to me is, if you know anything about Detroit, you know that the vast majority, the population, it is, you know, the overall population of Detroit is predominantly African American. And so the idea of living in a city in which there was a lack of perhaps self-pride a lack of ethnic pride. I had never experienced that. And it was a dynamic that was puzzling. And yet, it gave me a charge because what I knew was, if it's one thing that I benefited from, anyone who knows me knows that I'm a staunch defender of the 313 of Detroit. In fact, yeah, that's right, because if folks start to talk about it too bad, and I'm fighting words, right? And yet, I will tell you, if I could transfer anything from my lived experience in Detroit that I'm trying to bring here in Grand Rapids and have tried to work to establish, is that my brothers and my sisters, I had the distinct advantage that many in Grand Rapids who weren't of color, who were Caucasian, I had the experience of growing up in a city in which every bit of success that I saw looked like me. And if I'm lying, I'm flying in terms of what that does to your psyche, what that does to you. My dentist was black. Our family doctor was black. The bus driver was black. The police officers were black. My principal was black. My teachers were black. The guy who owned the party store was black. The guy who owned the gas station was black. The mayor was black. Well, guess what? Little Joey grew up actually believing that he could do anything. I didn't know back then, back in the 70s and 80s, that wasn't called, it's called swag now, what I got. That's what I had, that's swag. That's what you get. You get swag when you have this strong sense of self. It's not arrogance, not pride, it's just you have this feeling that you can do anything because you saw it. So I literally would spend time wondering, what am I going to do when I grow up? I could be a doctor. My grandmother used to tell me, she says, you should be a doctor, right? And that's a good idea, right? Thought about that. My granddad said, you should be a lawyer, okay? Someone told me you should be mayor. Everything that people talked about, everything that they recommended or suggested, I thought to myself, I could do that. Why? I saw it. How can you possibly be something that you can't see? And I am working diligently by way of the Urban League, by way of every bit of social capital that I have, to create a city, create a community in which, whether it's a little Latino child, African-American child, a white child, Asian child, doesn't matter, that they can actually see, as they grow up, success that looks like them. I'm seeking this opportunity to create this model city. And people think people literally think I'm crazy. Because there's Grand Rapids? Yeah, man, Grand Rapids. We can be that. We can be that model medium-sized city. We have all the ingredients. We just have to get the right recipe. But the ingredients are there. And we happen to be at a point in time in which, you know what, we can afford to take a few risks and create this city where we can have more opportunity. And people are, some might, think or say, Joe, I'd love to see that nationwide. I would too, but here's the thing, I want to start here. Let's model that thing here and then look to see if we can push it in other parts of the country. But right now, I'm not at all ashamed to say that my focus is the 616. I want to see us be that light on a hill. I want to see us be that city that is actually showing how to get things done, whether it be police and community relations, which I will tell you, I want you to imagine. And again, I'm talking to you as a black man. I want you to imagine, if you can for yourself, some of the most difficult conversations that you've ever had in your life. Just think about it, just for a second. Some of the most difficult conversations, right? I will tell you that when I am engaged sometimes with the communication with law enforcement, those are some of the most difficult conversations I ever have in my life. But as I've repeated, I refuse to run away. I'm not running away from it. Because the reality is if we don't talk about it, right? If we don't begin to unpack the difficulty, the complexity of what that means, then we're just going to be stuck where we are. And here's the thing, folks, we can't be this model medium-sized city until we begin to address, until we really dig deep and address issues like police and community relations. No way, no how. Our downtown can continue to prosper and grow, and we can have more businesses come in and more employers looking to hire. But until we get at some of those issues that are so full of tension, that sometimes want to make you swing, other times want to make you cry. Until we literally lean in and get at some of those things, we can't be this city that I believe you so desperately want us to be. But the ingredients are there. The ingredients are there, and I believe in our heart of hearts that it's about the will of the people. It's about the will of the people. Do we have the will to want to engage in that space, in that very uncomfortable space? Again, I don't think anybody in this room wakes up in the morning seeking ways to be uncomfortable. But that's what I'm putting out there as a challenge. There's this idea of stepping into a space that you don't have all the answers, but you have a heck of a commitment to listening and learning. When I was a little boy, my father, again, this was mentioned, I'm the youngest of 9. And I will tell you, I stand here, as my wife is a witness, I am my mother's favorite. I know that as a fact. My wife will second that motion. It is what it is. That's what I tell my siblings all the time. It is what it is. But my daddy, and in fact, I know my dad went to glory back in 2003. My dad also, I know that I was his favorite. I was the child of my parents' old age. I may have some others in the house here who have that same distinction. My daddy was 52 when young Joey came on the scene, and my mama was 38. Maybe back in that day that wasn't too much of an oddity, or maybe today that's not too much of an oddity, but back then it sure was. But I remember my dad was about 5'6", 5'7". But you know, if I probably learned most of what I learned in terms of leadership from my mom and my dad. And my dad, when he would tell me to do something and I didn't do it, my dad would come to me and he would grab my 2 ears. And he said, I want you to listen. And of course it hurt. But I want to suggest that it's why I am committed to effective listening to the degree that I am today. And I also believe that effective listening to some degree is a lost art form. For some of us, it's very, very difficult to actually sit there and not say a word, and just listen to the other person. And not just listen, but literally pay attention and engage in a dialogue to where the other person also is committed to listening. But we're living in a time right now in our country where, hey, we need to do some more listening. Because we're living in a time where, you know, it's a zero-sum game. I just got done with a campaign on last year, and man, I wish there was a way I could just snap my finger and just, you know, be elected, or just snap my finger and just be at election day, right? But a real opportunity to seek office requires an effective campaign and a strategy. And you know, we're in campaign season now in our country, and this idea of if you don't believe what I believe, then you know what, you suck. What kind of crap is that? Really? Just because you don't believe, just because I don't believe what you believe, I don't matter? I'm always pushing and advocating for this idea, this belief that, you know what? You have value. Your voice has value. Just because you don't believe what I believe, you still got value. You still bring us up to the table. But how many of you notice that we're living in a time in which people are being devalued based on their zip code, socioeconomic status, color of their skin, you name it, sexual orientation, you name it. Devaluing. And the question becomes, what right do you have, really? What right do I have to look at you and declare you as undervalued? That's above our pay grade. Anybody in this room? And a real leader is someone who is going to commit to listening, even when they've reached that pinnacle of success in leadership. They're going to commit to being a good listener, an effective listener. I had the opportunity, since I've been here in Grand Rapids and since I've been able to develop in the space of leadership, I've had the opportunity to walk alongside a lot of younger professionals, a lot of younger folks who are trying to engage in the space of leadership or just engaging in community. And I feel very strongly about the fact that, you got to be teachable. Because I'm a grown man and I'm still learning. I want to learn. I wake up hungry to learn. And there's something to be said about having someone in your midst, walking alongside someone who has also a desire to learn. My wife would probably accuse me of wanting to learn too much because it seems like every other day I get in the mail a package of books. And one day I'm going to read all of them. I don't have a whole lot of time right now, but I'm going to get through them, right? But it's for me, it's this reminder that got to keep learning, got to keep learning, got to keep learning. I want to share 3 things with you before turning it over to a time of Q&A. And that is 3 leadership attributes or 3 points of wisdom that have carried me throughout my time here in Grand Rapids and even before. And the source is all based in Africa. The first is a Ugandan proverb that says, prefer the leader who comes to you. Prefer the leader who comes to you. There's something to be said about you availing yourself, and again, as I've mentioned, going into that uncomfortable space. Leaning in. Going to the people. If you oversee an organization, going to your workforce. I've had a chance to watch a whole lot of folks in leadership, a whole lot of CEOs, a whole lot of line managers, a whole lot of pastors. And it seems the one thing that ties them together, the really good leaders, are the ones who make themselves available to their people. My pastor always tells me, as was mentioned, I'm an ordained minister. My pastor, one of the greatest pieces of advice that he ever gave me was, he says, Joe, the people have to know that you love them. The people have to know that you love them. Think about the dynamic that occurs in a relationship when someone who is leading you, when you know that they care about you. That's huge. Second, it's a Malawian proverb. It says, he who thinks he is leading and has no one following him is only taking a walk. We got a lot of folk up in Grand Rapids, up in the country, all throughout the world. They're just taking walks. They're self-appointed in their leadership, but they're just nobody's following them. And how many of you know that leadership can be very, very intoxicating? Man, it's something that if you're not grounded, if you don't surround yourself with individuals who will keep you grounded, if you don't surround yourself with wisdom, it's real easy to just fall in and just believe the hype. But if you think that you're leading and no one's following you, again, you're simply taking a walk. The third one is, one of my favorites, is a leader who does not take advice is not a leader. That's a Kenyan proverb. A leader who does not take advice is not a leader. I said it earlier. I'm going to tell you something. Joe Jones, I don't do well with know-it-alls. I don't. Now, I do well with people who are really, really smart. In fact, I prefer to be the cat at the table who's the least smartest. There's something to be said about having a table, having an organization, and surrounding yourselves with folks who are really, 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 really smart. But the kind of folks who, although they're really, really smart, they're still learning. They're still learning. And so my hope is that you will join me in being aspirational when it comes to the city of Grand Rapids. Perhaps for some of you, this is simply a stepping stone. Maybe you're heading out of here and your time here has been just to, matriculate through your undergraduate and your graduate studies. That's great. But for those of you who are planning to stay, I would love it if you would join me in committing to helping to make this a city that provides opportunity for all people, regardless of their socioeconomic status, the color of their skin, their zip code, their sexual orientation. That Grand Rapids be seen as that model, medium-sized city that everybody in the country is looking at and saying, man, that's what's up. Because I want to suggest that if that happens, we can all have swag. We can all have swag. Thank you. I think this is the time for Q&A. Chad, is that correct? Okay.
Thank you for speaking. I enjoyed your talk. I'm also from inner city Detroit, born and raised. I came here and graduated from Grand Valley. And I just wanted to comment, everything that you said, it's just so true. It was the first thing, even when I came here to Grand Rapids, it was the first thing that I noticed, the racial disparities, the economic disparities between communities of color and majority white communities. What are some of the things, though, and you talked a little about your father, your family life, your church. What is that one thing that keeps you going, that keeps you optimistic? I think this is a time where a lot of folks are just becoming pessimistic at things. We don't see that it's getting better. And so we are intentionally disengaging because we think that the system did not work for us. It will not work for us. You know, it's an insane man who does the same thing over and over again and expecting something different. What is that one thing that keeps you optimistic that, in fact, this can be different?
Actually, a couple of things. One is the opportunities that I have every day to engage in dialogue and relationship with my elders. The one thing that's rich about Grand Rapids that most people don't realize is there's a rich heritage here that consists of individuals who have blazed significant trails, especially within the African American community, whose pride is great. But they're seeking ways to pour into the next generation, and the next generation isn't always willing to, to receive what our elders are looking to pour into. And so that's what keeps me, that's one of the things that keeps me going, is to be able to engage and to have relationship and have community with my elders. But the other thing is actually my grandchildren and my children. My wife and I, we have it's for another talk. We have, again, 4 children that range in age, and we have 5 grandchildren. And I will tell you, I said it earlier, I'm going to be all right. I know I operate with a certain privilege, right, in terms of income, right, or socioeconomic status. I will tell you that what I think about most are my grandchildren's grandchildren. The generation that I won't see them. But if it's one thing that gets me up in the morning and really encourages me and really keeps me wanting to engage in this space of creating an optimal community, it is this idea of what is it that I can do to make sure that perhaps some of this stuff is not here. Some of these social ills aren't here for my grandchildren's grandchildren. I mean, some of you may be familiar with Methuselah. I don't think I'm looking at that type of longevity. So I don't expect to see my but the idea of being able to, do work that's going to benefit future generations. Because if you look at it through historic lens, that is what our foremothers and our forefathers did. That's what, those who were engaged in chattel slavery were doing on behalf of myself and those who look like me and those who look like you. This idea of, doing work and making sacrifices in preparation for me today. And so I feel obligated to do all that I can for my grandchildren's grandchildren.
I know I'm pushing it, but I got one more question for you. My first day, freshman year, coming to college, it was exciting, or at least it was supposed to be. But honestly, that night, I didn't feel excited. I felt guilt. Have you ever felt guilt for leaving people behind, or you think that you left people behind, and how did you overcome that?
My first experience when I got here to Grand Rapids, I bought a home. It was 1996, and true story, it was, the sun had went down. It was in the spring of 96, and I went to my side door. This is my first house that I owned, and I opened the door, and it was a clear night, and all you could see was stars, and it was silent. And I'm going to tell you something, that messed me up.
Tragic crazy.
Right?
Tragic.
Because I had never experienced this kind of quiet. I grew up on a major thoroughfare in Detroit called Van Dyke on the east side. Van Dyke goes from the Detroit River like 30 miles out, right? It's nothing but traffic all day, all night, right? So it freaked me out. And I was actually, you bring that up, I remember I got emotional. Because my thought was more people should be able to experience this type of peace and serenity, and yet, I'm at the same time, I'm a city boy. I mean, I love the concrete jungle. Don't take this personal, but I'm allergic to suburbs, right? I go there, but I got to live in the city, right? Same. And so there are times when I feel like, in fact, it's most of the time in the work that I do, this idea of what is it that I can do, again, to be of benefit for those that I don't even know, right? And that may sound cliche-ish or corny, but it's true. Like, it's really about sacrificing and engaging in such a way to where, we're literally trying to make life better. And this is through the work of the Urban League as well as the City Commission, wanting to make life better for generations to come, but also for the current generation. Because, most of us can't imagine what it means to have perhaps, generational poverty, or, and what that does to you, whether it's PTSD, whether it's just hopelessness, whether it's this idea that, you're never going to succeed because you've not seen enough success. And so there's a lot that gets me up in the morning that keeps me going. And that is something that's a significant part of it, this idea that at the end of the day, it ain't about me. It really is not about me. And I'm cool with that. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Hi, thanks again so much for taking the time and being so candid and genuine with us. My question for you, you mentioned self-care. With all the work to do, you don't wake up in the morning looking for trouble, but has a way of finding it.
That's right.
How do you stay charged, and how do you feel comfortable letting yourself recharge with all the work there is to do?
We have, one of the things that we do at the Urban League is we have a pretty flexible schedule. It was funny, when I first started there back in 2011, I noticed that on Fridays, staff left at like noon. I'm like, hold up, hold on, why? Seriously, I was like, okay, our door says Monday through Friday, like 8 to 5. That's what it says on the front door. And it was something that, unbeknownst to me, it took me, my chief operating officer explained, no, that's one of those unwritten rules because, because of the work that we do, we really try to find opportunities in which our staff, our team, can kind of get away. And so we promote everything from obviously leaving early on Friday, very flexible with schedule. Things come up, we don't push back and say you have to be. We're not as rigid perhaps as other employers. And we also, if you were to come to our office right now at 7:45 Eastern, you would walk through our building. And on the walls we have quotes that have been painted on the wall, and it's about affirmation. It's about encouragement, and it's not only for our client guests, for those who are coming in, it's also for those who work there. It's this reminder that you matter. It's this reminder that you're important, but it's also a reminder that you got to take care of yourself. And so. Me, myself, I actually have coined a phrase. I call it the 3 J's. What keeps me sane are Jesus, Jessie, which is my wife, and jazz. I'm a jazz head, ladies and gentlemen. I love jazz. And not just any jazz, I love straight jazz. There's this stuff, and no disrespect here, but there are those who might like this stuff called smooth jazz. I can't roll with that, but that's okay. I want you to enjoy it, right? But it's jazz, right? And those are 3 things, Cameron. Oh, Cameron Jones. Okay, cuz. Okay, yeah. Those are 3 things that literally keep me sane because I experience them every single day, every day. And so I'm very, very intentional about seeking Jesus. I happen to lay next to every night Jesse, right? And I listen to jazz every single day. That's therapeutic for me, right? I go to the YMCA. That's therapeutic for me. Because allow me to be transparent once again. Being involved in politics, I'm not a violent person naturally, but I'd be lying if I told you that there have been a few folks who I've wanted to punch. And so instead of hauling off, punching them, getting arrested, right, having a record, I go and I let off steam at the local YMCA. And I've been able to maintain this system that has been good for me. So yeah, it's about intentionality.
Thanks.
Yep.
Hi. I thank you for coming out and talking to us today. I wanted to ask a question a little more specific about this city.
Okay.
So I don't know if this is necessarily your area of expertise, but I know Grand Rapids has an increasing population in recent years of immigrants and refugees.
Yep.
So I wanted to know specifically what the city is doing or has done or wants to do to integrate that population into the community.
Thank you. That's a great question. As you know, with what's happening in our country and what many who are immigrants are feeling threatened and feeling as if they're not wanted, Grand Rapids has made it a point to operate as a place that wouldn't necessarily be referred to as a sanctuary city. And I will tell you that we've gotten pushback from activists in the community because we haven't declared ourselves as such. And part of that is because we have an administration in Washington, D.C. that says that any city that deems themselves as such, they will potentially look at the withholding of federal dollars. Well, you know, one could look at that and say, okay, let's play poker. I'm going to call your bluff, right? We've chosen not to. We've chosen to do everything that a sanctuary city would do outside of calling ourselves a sanctuary city. We've had regular, and we continue to have dialogue with our police department in terms of what our expectations are when it comes to being in contact with those who are immigrants. I will tell you that it's something that is heartbreaking, because we have heard countless stories, both from local law enforcement as well as from community organizations, churches, and others who have told us stories of families who are operating just in constant fear. We have families, parents, who will not leave their house to walk their kids to school. And quite often the school is not too far away, but they are fearful that they will be arrested, or there will be a greater presence of ICE. And so we are very, very sensitive, and we are working diligently to make sure that our law enforcement officers realize what our position is, which is, you know, we don't feel as if there's a need to inquire with someone what their legal status is. And we have a police department that I think is trying their best and doing a good work. And kind of like one of the things that people don't see is we have officers who are walking these kids to school. Cameras don't pick that up, but that's a big deal because they understand why. And so I think that we have to continue to make Grand Rapids welcoming, but B, what is it that we can do on our end to make it to where not only are we welcoming, but they're accepted, and we do all that we can to apply pressure at the state level, but most importantly at the federal level, to get to a better place with this. The thought of having a country that is devoid of immigrants, ludicrous. And what's most interesting is the tension that exists between perhaps those who feel very strongly that we need to be more strict compared to those who are seeking a workforce. Because right now, I don't know if you noticed this, but employers are having a very difficult time finding even basic workers to engage in the workforce. And so, again, we're at a time in our country right now where it is, like I said, never a dull moment. And it's always something, but you know, at the end of the day, you know, I keep repeating it, you know, why can't we in Grand Rapids be that place that really exemplifies how to engage our immigrant population? So, thank you. Yep.
Great to have you here, and I'm glad I'm here as well.
Thank you, sir.
Now, you've been in GR for 22 years. Can you just kind of tell me, what do you see some of the positive trends that is going on in our community, and also some of the negative trends? What's your assessment, having been here 22 years?
Sure. Positive trends is I see our city really beginning to embrace the idea of inclusion and equity like never before. I see our city recognizing the value of it, both from a value proposition, from a business perspective, as well as what it means to us being a city that people want to raise their families in, right? I mean, the moniker that's long been connected to Grand Rapids is a great place to raise a family. Well, you got more and more families these days who want to raise their children or raise their families in a community that looks more like our country. And so that requires greater diversity, which means the need for us to be more inclusive. And so I think that we're working toward a better place. I think but we have improved significantly in terms of just general acceptance, whether it be ethnicity as well as sexual orientation. I think that we're getting to a place where we really are, you know, welcoming and embracing inclusion. Some of the negative trends, or some of the things that are not going so great, is, and I mentioned it earlier, is just the idea of affordability for a home. I mean, my former colleague, Dave Allen, who served with me on the city commission, who recently stepped down due to some work, the need to focus more on his day job. We used to have this thing that we did every city commission meeting. I sat next to him. Every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, right before we got into our meeting, he would go to the website for the Grand Rapids Area Realtors, GRAR, and we would look and see what the number was that week for the number of available single-family homes in Grand Rapids. And folks, we're talking anywhere between like 80 and 150. Okay, we have about 50,000 single-family homes in the city. And on a regular basis, we only have 80 to 150 available. I mean, it's a great problem to have, but that's crazy, right? I'm not a real estate expert, but I know that that's not enough housing stock. And any of you who have perhaps entered into the fray of trying to find a home, you know it's impossible. You got folks, my wife is also in real estate. Yeah, a nice pitch. My wife also sells real estate. She's a realtor. And what's crazy is, we see stories of folks who are paying 10, 20, 30 over asking price. Why? Because they want to live in the city, which is great. You got mobility options, you got green space, how many of you have been able to hang out in some of our neighborhood business districts? I mean, if you don't want to, you don't have to go downtown to have a good time. You can go to East Hills, you can go to the west side, you can go to the southwest. There are so many different areas throughout the city in which you can be in community and have all the amenities of what a downtown has to offer. And so folks want to live in the city. And again, that's a great thing. The problem is we can't build houses fast enough. And for those of you who don't know, we can't afford to build affordable housing. How crazy is that? Because of the cost of construction, because of the cost of labor, it's just not affordable anymore to build affordable housing. And so you have rents that are going up. I'm sure that you all have some testimonies in here of how much you're paying for rent, right? Or how much you're paying, or how much you used to pay for rent back perhaps when you were younger compared to perhaps what your children or your grandchildren are paying today. It's astronomical. And, again, it's a good problem to have, but it also brings with it a lot of tension because, as I mentioned, the folks who need to live here, who need to live in the urban core can't, which I think puts even more of a strain and stress on the transit issue that we have. This idea of needing a more robust local transit option so that we can really benefit from operating as more of a metropolitan area. So, yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Betty B.G.
Short Betty B.G. Yes, I've watched Joe grow since he's been here in the community. I don't know, can you hear me now? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And I came here 53 years ago as a married person, so have been here a while and still have a hard time saying Grand Rapids is my home. So that's the first thing. But you started out talking about housing. And what I wanted to say is when I came to this town, even if you were middle class Caucasian, there were plenty of places to live. And there were many homes available. But if you looked like me, you were hard pressed to find a place to live in the city that was decent. I've watched that cycle come around again. The church, I live out a little ways. The church I go to is in the core city on Logan and James, across the street from MLK Elementary or K-8 school. When we drive in to go to church, when we come down Robinson Road, sometimes Cherry, sometimes Wealthy, I do not see a person who looks like me until I am sitting in the pew. When I came here, everyone looked like me. 25 years ago, everyone in that neighborhood looked like me. And the tragedy of all of that is my grandchildren, looking for a place to live, cannot afford to buy a home because they don't have that much money in their pocket right now, are paying $1,800 a month to live right around the corner from you on Franklin Street. To me, that is just an absolute crime. And what they have done is 3 adults live in the house with their children so that they can make it. But that change is so significant. We talked about this, I think 3 years ago in some city forums with Greg and his people, all about what they were going to do regarding housing. And all it has done is go up. And the gentrification is unbelievable, where the dominant culture has come in, and the folks that look like me and my brown friends have been pushed out, unless they want to pay that $1,800 for a house on Franklin and Eastern. Okay, what are you doing? That's the first thing you brought up. And I just want to know what concerted efforts are going on now, because I've seen change in the reverse. Okay?
Thank you. In terms of what I and my colleagues are doing on the commission, I will tell you that one of the most frustrating aspects of that particular issue is the limited opportunity that we have and limited tools that we have to really correct some of those things. Now, there might be some who would say, well, you're passing the buck. No, the reality is we live in a state that does not allow what's called inclusionary zoning, in which you're able to have it to where every development that takes place would have to include affordable units or some form of low-income housing. We don't have the right to do that as a city. We can't. The state says we can't. It's against the law. They have it in New York. They have it in other cities throughout the country. It's readily available. But we are limited in what we can do as a city. Some of the things that we are doing is, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, this idea of engaging or having civil discourse. It's fair to say that in particular, my colleague Ruth Kelly and I, who is a very passionate advocate for all things equity, we have and we continue to have ongoing discussions with developers, with the development community, those who develop housing, and we ask the question: what is it going to take for you to be able to add affordable units to your development? And there are some, I think we'll see probably over the course of the next year or so, where there'll be some more creative financing, where it won't be necessarily the banks, will it be others who will be willing to put up what I would call patient capital, which means their ROI their ROI will be extended. The traditional ROI is about 5 years. We have folks in our community who have the means to provide funding, and their ROI is about 20 years. Because what we hear from developers, what we hear from those who actually have the money to build housing, is that, in order for them to actually come out ahead, is they have to create these market rate units. Well, my colleague, Commissioner Lanier, had said that, I think it was about a year ago, she said that she could no longer, or she was going to be hesitant in voting for any project that came to the City Commission that was all market rate. Now, again, the complexity in all this, and I don't mean to bore you all, but we need affordable, we need more market rate, we just need more housing. But we need, the thing that we need the most is affordable housing. Now, one thing that I'm not a fan of, and one thing that I am not an advocate for, I don't advocate for concentrated poverty. So what that means is we have a number of folks, perhaps, who think, oh, okay, I'll do affordable housing, but I'll put it in communities and areas that are already low income. Well, you have, and all of the research shows that the best outcomes, whether it be health, whether it be income, whether it be educational outcomes, All the best outcomes come from mixed income communities. Okay? Now, hypothetically speaking, if Commissioner Joe Jones says, you know what, we then need to go and create affordable housing opportunities in parts of the city that are middle income, right? There's something that kicks in. Are people familiar with NIMBYism? NIMBYism, right? That's what we're dealing with right now. Because because the thought is, for quite a few folks in those neighborhoods is, oh, you're going to bring my property values down. Or it's going to, these new homes or these units that are affordable are going to consist of folks who won't take care of their homes or they're low income, right? Again, if I had the answer, I probably wouldn't be here right now. I'd probably be, again, traveling throughout the country, again, making a lot of money for having the answer. But at the same time, I want to engage. I want to be part of trying to find that answer because it's so complex. And some would say, well, it's just as easy as changing legislation at the state level. Yeah, that would help. But most people come to us at the city thinking that it's something that we can do. And in many ways, they don't want to hear that our hands are tied, but our hands are tied. And so it goes back to what I said earlier, it's about the will of the people. Imagine if we had the development community that said, you know what, because it's the right thing to do, I'm going to, for all the housing that I create, I'm going to create within this housing plan more affordable units. Because we have some affordable housing in our city, but I like to say that there's a difference between affordable housing and quality affordable housing. We have some affordable housing. Maybe some of you have lived in some of these units where you look around, you think to yourself, yeah, it may be affordable, but this is not nice, right? And you got families living there. We need to create quality, affordable housing opportunities because, again, the best outcomes for all is in mixed income communities. So.
I know that. May I say one more thing?
Yes, ma'am.
In this area that I'm talking about, which is core city, let's say Fuller to Madison, Cherry Street all the way over to Hall is where I'm talking about. One of the things that has upset me so much as a former school teacher for many years in that very area, we had sometimes a crossing guard, sometimes not. In order for the kids to cross the street to go to the schools like Sigsbee and Henry, sometimes the crossing guards didn't come. Now, they have yellow markers out there on probably 4 or 5 of the streets. It's not my children walking across the street to go to school. It's for the dominant culture going to all these places that we can eat and all the little boutiques and stuff. That breaks my heart. And that was a city move to put those markers out there to ensure that these people are safe. And for all these many years, my children weren't so safe. That's the kind of thing that I think city can have input. And I just wonder who determines stuff like that.
At the end of the day, it's traffic and safety, and it's based heavily on.
I know 2 kids that got killed out there.
Right. It's based on traffic patterns and the fact that you have an increased incidence of folks, getting hit or involved in car accidents, with pedestrians. But to answer, one thing I want to add to that is, what is critical in all of this is the creation of economic development opportunities within the city for those who have been historically marginalized. Because again, when I got here, folks, 1996, Wealthy Street, you had Peter Wegge, who had just dropped a lot of cash to totally renovate Wealthy Theater, right? And because it was boarded up, it was nothing, right? And then there was a lot of activity, illegal activity going on the corner of Wealthy and Fuller. Now that's Huntington Bank, that's GRCC, and a few other, I think a yoga spot, right? Well, when I got here, those things weren't there. And so I've heard the stories, and I've actually watched how Wealthy Street has been transformed. I've done my homework. I understand what Wealthy Street used to be. And that is, that's a legitimate reason, not just for you to be concerned, but we should all be concerned with the fact that as the neighborhood was transformed, there were a lot of promises that were made in terms of opportunities being made available for those who were the indigenous, who lived there. Those never came to pass. And so if we're not careful, we could very well have the exact same thing happen again. I will tell you that not just me, but all of my colleagues on the commission, very, very sensitive to that, in particular our mayor, because we can't be this equitable city. We can't be this modern or this model medium-sized city if we're continuing to develop a community of haves and have-nots. And so, Betty, like I said, it is every single day it seems like the tension just increases. But all I'm saying is, come on in and get a taste of this tension, why don't you? Because we literally need more and more people to want to, extend themselves and lean in and be a part of trying to find some solutions. I mean that because, and again, it comes down to civil discourse. It comes down to disagreeing without being disagreeable. It comes down to folks sitting down at the table and just looking to try to find ways to find some solutions. And it ain't easy. It ain't easy. Like I said, man. So I feel you. And I especially am sensitive to the fact because, again, I'm working to be a historian. I know how it got this way. Now, I could, I happen to have a mantle in the Urban League that if I wanted to, I could probably raise a whole lot of hell. I could probably just call people out all day and all night, right? And I got a communications background. I used to have a PR firm. I could probably be pretty effective at that, right? But instead, what I want to do is I want to pull folks in and really try to find ways to do this stuff together, because if I don't, if we fall back on what has been the traditional, which is to, I think in some ways, calling folks out, we don't get anywhere. At the end of the day, folks who have been involved in doing things that have brought this gap, they're complicit. I don't mind calling folks out. But I also believe that it can be just as effective if I go to them, like we're doing, literally. Ruth and I are literally, I kid you not, I'll invite you sometimes, you can see it. Like I said, that's why I love Ruth, because Ruth, she's like me. We engage the uncomfortable. And we go and we have these conversations with folks, and they look at us like we're crazy, because they're in business. And I'm not trying to in any way demonize business folk, but they're like, what are you talking about? I gotta, I'm investing this money, it's a good thing for the city. Yeah, it's good, but. And so we need more people advocating and pushing and beginning to aspire to have a city that's more equitable and a city that provides opportunity for all people. So, okay. We're good? Thank you, Chad. All right. Thank you.